So how does a meditator end up in burnout? I'm Melanie McCool. I'm the entrepreneur's hypnotherapist and peak performance coach. And when I speak to women about my work, they often ask me questions. Well, why isn't it enough that I am meditating, that I'm doing yoga, breath work, sound baths, I'm listening to hypnosis recordings, binaural beats, hemisync, holosync, and on, and then all of the conscious modalities, the courses on manifesting, all of these things. Why am I still in burnout? You know, burnout is defined by the World Health Organization as a condition that results from not managing stress. And, well, you might think, well, then we manage stress, right, by doing things like meditating, yoga, going on vacation, right? Radical self-care. Right? I practice radical self-care. Oh my gosh, can I relate? Unfortunately, that doesn't account for the number one source of 24/7 stress. And that is what's going on between your own ears. And so if you do find yourself, even if you are a yoga teacher or your practices in healing modalities, if you still find yourself low energy, overwhelmed, feeling like you're disconnected from your work, from your purpose, even very much unproductive, and feeling like you should be further along than you are, that is the definition of burnout. And I'm here to tell you from my own experience that no amount of radical self-care in the ways that I've already described is going to address the number one source of 24/7 stress that's going on between your own ears. So it's like you're engaging in these wonderful practices that for the time being, they do neutralize the biochemistry of stress in your body. But then you might as well be drinking the stress from a straw, because in here you've got things like the inner critic, comparisonitis, impostor syndrome, the negative forecaster of doom, right? The one that tells you that you should be further along than you are. All the shoulds, right? You've already taken all the courses. You've got the know. Why aren't you doing it? What's wrong with you? Let me just flagellate myself. Let me whip myself into shape, because that's how I got this far already. Right. So why doesn't it work? Because the stress, it will bombard you over and over again because of what's going on in here. And so the answer to the change has to come at the level of thought, and not just any old thoughts, but the level of subconscious thoughts, the thoughts that may be running under the surface. And that is exactly why I am a certified master trainer of hypnosis, not just a hypnotherapist, but as I help the women that come to me because they have an incredible desire to see their work come to fruition in the world, that they may bless the world with their love, and yet they find themselves just out of it. I think the most heart-wrenching for me is when a woman who says to me, I used to know who I was. I used to feel really powerful about my work. I used to know exactly what I was doing, and I was courageous, brave, and I just don't feel that way anymore. That's when they show up in my work. And what we get to do is to change that underlying programming so that it is no longer that of self-sabotage, but it is of self-support. Because what I'll tell you is from my experience and from working with clients is that if you don't address this number one source of 24/7 stress, you ultimately can be taken out of the game by burnout. In fact, it can take you all the way out of the game and take your health if you aren't careful. Because that ultimately is a self-preservation strategy of your subconscious, of your body. If you feel so negatively about the business, then your subconscious mind is going to lead you away from pain. It will always lead you away from pain and towards pleasure. And so my work with clients is to help you to regain that inner power. You are more powerful than you've been led to believe. And we can eventually eliminate the internal negativity that is the 24/7 source of stress. We pull out those weeds, right? We get rid of the self-sabotaging thoughts and the habits and behaviors that those cause, which are those that keep you from going towards your dreams. And instead, we program your mind for prosperity, for enthusiasm, for having that inspiration to take action, to trust your gut on the decisions that are going to help you to not only break the glass ceiling in your mind, but ultimately lead you to the most efficient action that'll help you to build your business faster without ever feeling anything like burnout. In my work, we are helping women to see their desires come to fruition, because I firmly believe that women have an incredible role to bless the planet with our love. And if you're an entrepreneur, then you've got everything that it takes to see that to fruition when you pull out the weeds. And so why isn't it enough to just engage in meditation, yoga, breathwork, sound baths? All of these modalities are really powerfully good because the underlying programming still keeps you in 24/7 stress. But here's where it gets really fun. Once you have pulled out the weeds and we planted those beautiful seeds of prosperity, that programming that runs from within so that you're self-supporting, when you engage in meditation, yoga, qigong, sound baths, breath work, all of the beautiful things that you can do, they're no longer just a balm to a nervous system that is anxious, stressed, overwhelmed. It's no longer just to neutralize the biochemistry of stress. No, my love. Then it becomes an upregulation of the neurochemistry, of bliss, of ecstasy. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you were engaging in those practices, not just to neutralize the biochemistry of stress so you weren't literally dying from a stress disorder, but instead you were doing them because you were going into that next level of who you are, that leaning into enlightenment, that leaning into what is incredibly available to us here, because you were wired for that. That's what you're wired for. But we've got to perhaps get that circuitry running in a way that blesses you versus taking you out of the game. And if what I'm speaking of is landing, it's because it comes from my own experience. I guess my mother taught me yoga when I was about 16. So yoga, and I've been engaged in personal development since, I think my first journals were when I was about 11, because my household was a very dysfunctional place to be. I think that's why my mother took on yoga. She thought that that might help her. But ultimately, the level of thought was where the problem is. So about age 16, I turned to lean into nutrition and health, and how diet or nourishment affects our biochemistry, our mental health, our capacity, essentially peak performance. I started yoga when I was 16. I did yoga, I was a yogini. I did yoga every single day, in fact, until my daughter was born. And so many practices since then. So a Whole Foods enthusiast, and engaged in all of these things. And still I burned out. I didn't understand what I'm sharing with you now, which is that ultimately there were programs that were running in here that had been laid down in my youth by what I saw and experienced in my dysfunctional family. And until those were addressed, that 24/7 stress was running all the time. That negative forecaster of doom, the inner critic, comparisonitis, impostor syndrome, feeling like you should be further along, that ran the show until I found the key. And now I am handing you the keys. It is what I do, what I am compelled to do. My love in this world is to help you to understand that you are more powerful than you've been led to believe. And so I would invite you to come into my world, into Program for Prosperity. Program for Prosperity is an online self-hypnosis course for entrepreneurs so that you can pull out the weeds and plant the seeds of prosperity. And if you would like my support in applying that, which I highly encourage you to do, because if these programs have been running for 35 years or more, you could probably use a little help from an expert that can give you the most powerful ways to efficiently eradicate that self-sabotage, right? Then I'm going to invite you into the Prosperity Lounge. And perhaps that one-to-one work is what is going to help you to supercharge your results, to do more over the next 6 months than you would in years, or perhaps ever, without this work. And so if you'd like to learn more about that, I would encourage you to reach out for a call, and we can determine what makes sense for you at this point in your life. But I'll tell you that if you are a heart-centered, impact-driven entrepreneur, and you find yourself anywhere near burnout, that is not the way it has to be. I help clients to earn more with less work without feeling all of that strange anxiety around money, around overworking, around overgiving, around boundaries, around, we can go on and on. But they do that. They are free to break the glass ceiling in their mind and serve more so that their love blesses the world in the way that it was designed to. And if you don't do the work, then you might end up like, well, most entrepreneurs. Most fail. And I believe it's straight up due to burnout. Why do you step away from something that you had a fire in your belly for? Is it because you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and negativity about your business, unproductive, and therefore it fails? That's what burnout is, my friend. And burnout doesn't have to happen when you get this in line. When you get your programming online, you'll be freaking amazed at what you can actually create. You'll probably hear the helicopter, so I'm gonna wrap this up. So I don't have to yell at you over a helicopter. Just wait a minute. While we're waiting, I would love to know, what incredible, loving self-care practices do you employ? Are you a meditator? Do you practice yoga? Do you get really good sleep? Do you nourish your body properly? Do you move your body? Do you practice radical self-love? And if the answer to any of those is not really, or not with any predictable consistency, then the answer is those aren't the habits yet. But that's exactly what we'll get to do in Program for Prosperity. So what I would love for you to understand is that you may start with me as in overwhelm, feeling stressed out, overwhelmed, exhausted, burned out, angsty, literally filled with guilt, shame, right? Fear, anger, all of those things. You might start there. That's okay. Come on in. Because we're going to move you along into a place where you're going to feel good. You're going to feel like, all right, I can feel good most of the time. I can notice that I can wake up with enthusiasm, and I can take the next right step in my business, and I can feel really good about where I'm going. And then as you continue, then you get to the place where, oh, now I can upregulate this beautiful neurochemistry, the happy dose, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. I can upregulate that. I can experience more highs, healthy highs here. I can feel really good. In fact, I can begin to see the world in a very different way. And this is what we call the path to enlightenment, my friends. This is not a question. If I really were to tell you what my work is, it is to take you from the animal brain, fear, doubt, worry, the negative forecaster of doom, to the human mind, creativity, focused on love, growth, oriented, prosperity minded. And then to a place where all is well, all the time. Even when the world throws crazy stuff at us, because it will continue to do so. I could go on and on. But the last thing I will say today is, if you've been sold the nonsense that the world will just magically always go right for you once you get your vibration in line, sorry, it's not true. The world will still throw its monkey wrenches at you. You'll still have to deal with lemons. But when you're in a place where you're programmed for prosperity, when you feel good, when you know all is well, even the hardest things you navigate without swinging to that side, without swinging to anxiety and insomnia and feeling like you're at the end of your rope and just wanting to quit. You can handle all of it. Everything and anything in life hand you. And so with that, I would love to have your feedback. Let me know how this lands for you. How are you feeling about this conversation? Because the more calls I have with women who are looking at this work that ask me, how is this different from, I've bought this program, I've listened to these recordings, I've done all of these things, and here I am 20 years into this freaking personal development journey, and I'm still not able to manifest my desires. What does it take? I'm handing you the keys. This is what it takes, and it's not hard. And you can receive more over the next 6 months than you would in years or ever when you lean into this work with me. And I would love to be with you, to link arms with you, so that you can see everything you've ever desired come to fruition in your life. And so with that, I am Melanie McCool. I'm the entrepreneur's hypnotherapist and peak performance coach. And I can't wait to meet you on the call and then in the lounge. And with that, have a beautiful day. You deserve it.